into the session here. So I'm Jeff Henwood. I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy for the Alberta Municipalities, and I'd like to welcome you all to the first in a new cycle in our series of grant webinars, the top 10 pain points in grants and what you can do about it. Alberta Municipalities is committed to helping you, our members, access grant funding. In 2023-24, we hosted a series of 4 successful webinars and are thrilled today to host the first in a new series of webinars. So in addition to webinars, we have teamed up with Alberta Business Grants to bring you the latest information on available grants via a weekly newsletter. You can sign up for the Grant Gazette by visiting abmunis.ca and clicking on Joint Programs, and then clicking on Municipal and Not-for-Profit Grants, and that'll take you to the page where you can sign up. Again, that's abmunis.ca, Joint Programs, Municipal and Not-for-Profit Grants. And so, like last cycle, we're once again joined by David Kincade, founder of Alberta Business Grants Limited. David's background includes 12 years as a successful grant writer, totaling well over $10 million in wins. He is the lead instructor for the Advanced Grant Writing course and author of Golden Grant Rules, the ultimate guide for winning government grants. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to David.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And I also wanted to just give a welcome to Pia. You'll see her name here. Pia is on my team. She's great. She's going to be helping with the chat because we have some links and stuff and we want you to have them. I'm just going to share the screen like we normally do and just get rolling. And I'll just give you the there we go. So thank you to Jeff for choosing a really good topic this time around. We did that series last year, and we thought, okay, let's take this to the next level. So we're going to talk about the top 10 pain points in grants, or top 10 pain points in grants, and what you can do about it. A couple of things. I'll just get to it here, and I'll just show you. This will be our agenda today, so we'll do some welcome and announcements. You know about Pia, Jeff. Thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to talk briefly about me. Just some of you may not know me, but I won't go on too long, so don't worry about that. And then we'll go through these pain points. Apologize, pain points, and then we'll do a question and answer. So the objective of today is really to go through, winning grants with more joy and less pain, which I think would be nice for all of us. And my company's purpose is to build trust between business and government. And that's just a different mindset, I think, for, a lot of people when they get into grants, like, I want to win a grant, but you really want to be honest and transparent with people. And you will find you become, in my experience, much more successful at grants. A bit of background on me. I've got, my whole career has sort of been in this space. I've got an undergraduate degree in political science. I did a master's degree. Then I worked at the Alberta Ledge for 4 years. After that, I went and studied political science in a PhD program. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to get into, try business and kind of do government and do some business. So I got into writing grants, and I wrote economic grants, tech grants, municipal grants, ag grants for over a decade. Then I wrote a book, Golden Grant Rules. And then I got into teaching, grants 101, because I found like there was a lot of misinformation about grants and stuff. So that's when I moved into that. And, it was kind of in my background teaching in universities. And then during, 2001, I built this advanced grant writing course, which was something just much more thorough than a grants 101 course. I felt like I couldn't do everything I wanted in a day. So I, by all means, don't know everything about grants, and I'm not even going to pretend to, doing this and studying this my whole career, because I'm always learning. And I would, just wanted to say that. And just a couple of announcements and disclaimer up front. It's like, these are my ideas and experiences. I always tell people, my students, think for yourself. In the end, you're going to be, if you're a CAO or you're with the municipality, you're signing a contract. It's taxpayers' money. It's going to go on the front page of the newspaper potentially if something went wrong. So always think for yourself. Always be honest and accountable. And also, I just wanted to say, as I was writing this out, like the 10 pain points in grants, I was thinking, these, like at first we were like the top 10 pain points, but I was like, if you're struggling with the grant portal right before a submission, And I know usually some people, if you've been writing grants for a while, you might be smiling right now, thinking like, yes, that will be your top pain. So these are like, what I think usually the most severe pain points that we can go through and address today. But it's something as simple as like a word count on you might have misread 100 words instead of 100 characters or something, and you're putting it into the portal. That can be a real problem. So keep in mind, there's a lot of moving parts in grants. We sometimes get asked, will the slides be available? And they will be. We'll put it in the chat. We'll also, although I'm referencing a lot of links, and P is going to be putting those in for you as well. We've got them in PDF. So those will be available for you as well. Now, I know you're busy, so I'm gonna go along at I'll try not to go too fast, but go at a decent rate. Okay, you know what we typically do just before we jump into this, if you're okay, we sometimes just like to. This is part of a larger grant project that's working with Alberta municipalities, and they just like some basic information on you. So if you're okay, like which municipality you're from and years of experience, it's only two questions. If you're okay, I'm going to launch this poll right now. We'll share the results with you, but it is this one, so I'll launch it. It should be showing up on your screen right now. Just give us an idea of who's here and helps us with our reporting practices. Wow, we got a big group. Okay, great. I'll keep it up just for another minute, or not minute, a couple seconds. Thank you for doing this. And I'll share the results with you. Here we go. Share results. So you should be able to see that now. It looks like we've got, yeah, a good mix. And I know we've got some other organizations in as well, too. I'm glad to see that as well. Thank you for coming today. Ironically enough, I don't know, Jeff and I laugh about this, but for some reason, it's about 60% of people have under 2 years experience in almost everything we do. So I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm actually going to take a picture of it just because the reporting structure is not as nice as that. Like I can never seem to find that beautiful image again. So I'm just going to take a shot of it. So we'll stop sharing. And we'll get back to the presentation here. Thank you for doing that. Okay, let's get at it here. So we'll have some time. Just remember at the end for some Q&A. And P is helping out in the chat as well. So if you've got some questions, and Jeff as well, so you can just go ahead and put them in there. Now, let's get started. So here's an overview of what we're looking at today. And that is the kind of the 10 pain points that I've seen in my career. And, you can read them, so I won't read them all to you right now because we're going to go through each one. But something that's really interesting about grants, I find right off the bat before we jump into this, is like grants are really clear. You either win it or you lose it. So they're a bit different than oftentimes like how did this turn out? It's a very clear outcome, which I really like, but it can create sort of a stress, if you will, around grants. So I'm going to walk you through this. And the first one I want to talk about is just understanding the game that you're playing when you get into writing grants. Now, our stats say the same. Here's some general stats that I find interesting in work that we've done before. Is you've got 60%, which is almost bang on with today, less than 2 years experience writing grants. Alberta municipalities ran a survey in one of their projects, and they found that 81% of survey respondents indicated that a list of available and municipal relevant grants would be very helpful. And when I read that, initially that was kind of something they told me. And I said, oh, well, they might think that's the real pain, but like it's only part of the problem. So I want to address that today because I think it's kind of funny. And then ABB Munich did another project with the policy department at the U of C, public policy on CAO tenure. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that, but it's very low. So I feel that you know grants are part of this makeup, this world, and in sales, they say, if you're doing sales solves all problems, you often hear that in business as an expression. But I find in grants, it's kind of applicable in sort of municipalities. Like, if you're winning a lot of grants, things are going probably quite well. I mean, I'm sure there's some other things. You have complex organizations, but I'm going to be referencing this as we go forward. So for those of you with new experience, hopefully this will land. And I just want to say thank you to those of you who have more experience for your time today, because it's greatly appreciated. Now, I'm going to talk about this first in the context of mild pain. I tried to have many different ways to come up with this, but like a grant calendar, and P, if you don't mind putting the links in there, we have having a grant calendar is really important, right? Your list of grants throughout the year. We are going to do that on December 2nd at our next webinar. We're going to bring a list of the most updated. Those of you here last year will remember we did that last year, so we'll be updating that. Everyone seemed to really like that one. We also have an open grant database part of this project, so you can search municipal grants for free. That link will be in the chat as well. And then we have funding on the Gazette. So every week, if you're not getting it, Pia will have it in the chat. You can sign up for the Gazette, and we show upcoming grant deadlines. Again, I'm not really calling this, the real pain. Like, yeah, it's pain. It's somewhat pain, but I want to talk to you more about severe pain. I know these are kind of corny. All right. Bear with me. I was trying a number of different ones, but if you don't understand how the rules work, you're at a serious disadvantage. So I'm going to start with you today. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I want to start with just, our Constitution. So here you can see, I was laughing. You're probably not thinking about looking at our Constitution this morning, but anyway, hope you got a coffee and you're doing well. You've got the Postal Service, you've got the military, they have responsibilities. And then you come to the next page, you'll see here municipal institutions in the province. And what I'm trying to get at here at a very high level is like where the buck stops, like who's really in charge. Now, I know this is a really sophisticated audience. So some of you are saying, Dave, but there's federal grants and there's grants that the province gives to municipalities to distribute money. So it does get complicated, but I want to begin with just this root level of data, if you will, of, okay, how is this game set up? Because if you're going to, I hate calling it a game, but you know what I mean? Like if you're going to get into grants, you kind of need to know the foundational parts and basically legally, where do you stand? So then I want to go one step further. And that is, this is the Municipal Affairs website. I just take screenshots of it because I don't want to, it's kind of, can sometimes be slow or problems if the sites are down. But what I find is most people on this first pane, they're like, okay, we got to go get a grant. So you go on the Municipal Affairs website and then you click right here. You're like, okay, there's the grants. That's what I want. But I'm just going to, I want you to pause when you get here. So there's a lot of really valuable grant information on here. And I'm going to start here. Assist municipalities in providing well-managed, collaborative, and accountable local governments. So these can be really good subheadings in your grant applications, right? Potentially project names. So you're going to have this idea of you want to do a project for your municipality, but I want you to understand, what the people who are funding you want to achieve. So the idea here is not just to find a grant and do something you want. Yes, you're going to do that, but you really want to get your head around what are they trying to achieve? They're giving out the money. I want to understand what they're up to. And this can be key performance indicators, project names. So I want you to pause and not go there, but come over here. And I'm going to go like this is where this can be, I like to call it grant gold, but you can find out what are they counting? What language are they using? And it's not super sophisticated. So let's just walk through this. I've taken a couple of screenshots here and we're going to go through their business plans, which are forward-looking documents, annual reports, which are go backwards, and the ministry mandate letter from the premier to the minister. You really want to get your head around these and don't get bored. Okay. Don't be sitting there being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to look at reports. Yeah. It's called grant reading and writing, but it's not as scary as you think if you can just kind of just crack it. So if you come here, you'll notice the business plan is 6 pages. That's it. 6 pages. And again, all the links will be provided for you in the chat. But look at, they have 4 outcomes, but performance measure, red tape reduced. So if you're doing like economic grants, I just want you to begin to put your head around, oh, maybe for our area, our municipality, we have like a red tape, you could even name the project that way. Even though it's like an economic development grant, you can begin to frame um, how they want to hear it, if you will. And it's a very just looking at what they count. The other thing I want to show you here, look how interesting this is. So this is their outcome 2. There's only 4. And does this look familiar? They want to have a zero net increase. Alberta live in viable communities with fiscally responsible, collaborative, and accountable local governments. Go back here. Other than well managed, it's kind of the same thing, collaborative and accountable. So again, when I see this, I'm like, okay, these are the terms you want to use. This is how it's going to set up the framework. And then I'm going from, okay, I've got to get my grant. I'm understanding what they want to do. And I'm beginning this art of putting an awesome grant application before it together. Now look at this outcome 4. Obviously, this one's a major issue in light of all the wildfires, etc. But I wanted you to think about your municipality. And let's say there's a whole bunch of projects you could be doing right now. And you're like, oh my gosh, we need emergency readiness plans. We need all these other plans. And you're prioritizing. What is kind of neat to look at this and say, well, we definitely need this. This is what they want. Now, again, you're going to make this your own. You're going to own this. But it's kind of like, oh, okay. Like I can look the counting. I can make my application count what they're counting. So when they see it, it's like, oh yeah, this municipality gets it. So again, super, super easy, not super easy, but a minimal work, and you can yield some pretty interesting information. The other document is the annual report. Again, now I'm assuming I could look in the chat as who's read the Municipal Affairs annual report. Maybe that would be a good poll question, but I'm going to assume that with 60% of you relatively new to this, maybe you haven't, but look at the awesome information you can find in this, right? This was the partnership, the strategic initiative. We're not talking small change either. You've got a county in the city of Lethbridge. They got almost $3 million and really helpful stuff. Look, they even tell you this project, because almost every grant will ask you about a project. What project are you doing, right? And it'll be, design work, HVAC, filter improvements, ultraviolet disinfection. I mean, you can just see the budget here, like the budget of the grant application, and then the way they frame it. And we're going to talk a little bit about this today, but look at their language. The scope of work will also include preliminary design for future upgrades. In my course right now, I bring in a project management expert to help, like, how do you write a project? And we're learning about project scope statements. So this is a skill. If you're taking notes, you definitely want to get in the hang of, like, what are the deliverables? To what standard are you doing it? It's got to be a certain height. Why are you doing it, etc. So you want to get good at that and then get good quotes based on those scope statements. Now, I don't want to get too down in the weeds right now, but this should begin to help you, advance. We're going to talk about more of this in the presentation coming up, but this idea of putting together a really awesome scope statement, detailed, and it's sitting here on a silver platter for you. And the last document I want to show, just hang with me. Okay, I know we're talking about documents on Alberta Municipal Affairs site, but you've got to I encourage you to get your head around this, to go from, oh, I need a grant, to what do they want? I'm going to create this project. And look what they say here. Working with municipalities, this is in the letter. So this is from the Premier to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and local business to better measure and reduce the time it takes to approve permits to create a more attractive business investment environment. They're providing you here content for your applications, right? So like when you're like writing what you're doing, you're like, okay, one of the things we're going to measure is approval of permit times. Now you may have thought of that, but if you're like me, you just might not know, right? Like, but you can just see this in this example. This red tape is a key word. This approval of permits can be in there. And you begin to send a grant application in that is like approved by the ministry, like, yeah, they get it. And then, think of it even one step further. The ministers in your municipality in the summer, after giving out the grant, you can give a really awesome update and say, look, we know you're measuring this. This is what we're doing. I mean, that's a high five uh, if I've ever seen it, in my opinion. You might say no, you might say otherwise. Okay. That's a little bit policy, you know, wonky, if you will, but I like that. Let's go through a couple other ones that are, I think, rather real, and we should talk about, because grants can be overwhelming and confusing. Let's talk about procrastination. Now, a couple of just interesting things you're probably aware of, but when you get into tight deadlines, procrastination kind of seems to uh, be an issue. And the time required for grant preparation, I have found in myself, unless you're really good at scheduling, is often underestimated. Like I just did an arts grant. I'm doing this collaboration for an arts grant. The first grant was 55 hours. 55 hours for one grant, that first one, on top of everything you're doing. So sometimes you'll look at it, but when you get into, you got to do the quotes, you got to get, the experience of the team, and on and on. So you often will have limited staff and time to prepare this. And so oftentimes I'll ask grant agencies when I speak to them, I'm like, what percentage are you getting of these things like in the last, right before the deadline? And it's large. It's a significant amount. So you can do this. So here's some tips for you. And again, make these your own, but start early. And I like to say 6 weeks. And let me give you an example. Let's say you've got to you're doing a bridge or wastewater treatment, and you're like, okay, I got to get a scope statement. So you send it over to engineering. Hey, can you put together a scope? We've got to send it out to the engineering company to get a proper quote. Hopefully you're doing that. Hopefully you're not just sending it to the engineering company and then they're stuck. Like, what do you want? Like, what size? So you send it to the engineering company or the engineering manager and director, and he or she's on holidays for the week. So then they don't get it back till a week later, but they just get back from holidays and they're busy. You got to give them a reminder. 2 weeks later, they get the scope done. You then send it to the engineering company. And I know we've got some engineering companies on here, so feel free to come in and question period. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But then they're super busy. You send them a reminder a week later, and then you finally get it a week later. So 4 weeks goes by on this quote. And that's normal. That's kind of normal. So I think that's really important. You get your head around that. When people are like, there's a grant just open, we got to do it. You want to move ideally to that sort of timing. And I always say an ease hour or 52-minute sprint. Like when you're starting, it can be so dreadful, at least, and I've experienced this. And that is, I use this all the time. I shouldn't say I've experienced this. I experience this. Just an ease hour. It's like, okay, I'm going to open it up, going to save the documents, I'm going to create a folder, I'm going to look at what they're doing. And I call it just cracking it. And it's really important for grants. Otherwise, you get stuck in this mess, which is going to hurt you, which leads to the third bullet is go to that go to the attachment sections. Usually that's where the pain is. Grants aren't like a test in school where you can study the night before. You usually have to rely on other teams, which leads to this point here, which is people can get triggered. So you need to, early on in the process, a lot of personalities in grants too, right? Because like if you ask for something at the last minute and they're busy, So I like to calendarize my invitations for the entire grant early. So if I'm starting 6 weeks out, I'm sending my calendar invites for the week. So I'm minimizing that back and forth because nobody really likes to go back and forth, right? And then for those CAOs out there, and if they're not here, it's like you have to stay somewhat involved throughout this process, at least at a high level, especially if there's a change or you need to step in to ask that engineering company, hey, we put this over to you. Can you please get it to us? We're in a bit of a rush. So oftentimes what happens, I find in grants is people want to give it to you and run away. Even if you hire a VIP grant runner, you can't do that. You've got to get the skills to stay in the battle, if you will. Okay. So there's just some top pains of procrastination. I'm by no means an expert on it, but I'm sure some of you can relate to me. Now, let's talk about the third one, which is your stakeholders usually have minimal experience writing grants. And what I mean by that is you'll hear, well, I was supposed to say crazy things, but I mean, it is crazy things. People say, what do we have to lose? Well, I just did a grant. I told you the first grant is 55 hours on top of what you're doing right now. So you've got your projects, your full-time job, and someone just says, what do we have to lose? Well, maybe staff. That could be one because people get burned out. So just getting educated on this, I think, is really helpful. You'll often get asked, like, where are we at with grants? And a lot of times, especially my students early on, it's like reactive and not proactive. You want to move from having twice a month meeting on grants where you're communicating back to the team. That's why we're doing the grant calendar with you. We're trying to get you in that proactive. And you'll often hear, I just saw a grant open. We need to go after it. So this can be really problematic. And then the pain is in grants, you need to be organized, you need to be a good writer, have good interpersonal skills so you're liked. Look at all these things. You need to pitch to the grant agency well, do the reporting, understand how government works, project management, tracking, tech sales. I'm not trying to freak you out, but there's not a lot of hardcore grant writers out there for a reason. Like it's a job that requires a lot of skills. You can get it. Don't worry. Like you can add this onto you and you will, but it adds to that pain where people are already busy. So here's some things that you can do. I would encourage you to get that master grant application built. And that is, bringing all of your documents together. I think most of you in this room would know what I mean, whether it's biographies, your annual reports, your financial statements, somewhere's where the team has access to it. I often argue like Pia's on here. Pia and I worked together for years, and Pia's a get it done person. And she was at a Radical when Radical was a client of mine. And you want smart, hardworking people on your grant file, especially initially. They're the person that knows everything that's going on. And I just say in my experience, that's a really helpful thing. Obviously, you can get training, doing things like today. You can get into a small group. I know some people are in groups with other grant writers and just some accountability. You can hire a VIP grant writer, but be careful. We learned last year that a lot, like some municipalities were hiring like a consulting firm and all the grants were the same, like they look the same. And the grant agency said to us, we don't like that because we have to score them in points and it didn't feel authentic. So don't just give it to them and run. Stay closely to it and customize it. And I always say, have regularly scheduled meetings. And if you do that, I just want to go back. Regular scheduled meeting would be like we deal with grants twice a week. This becomes much easier. This becomes, what do we have to lose? You can answer that. Where are we at with grants? You're ahead of them. So these are just some things. I mean, it's not everything, but it's definitely, you can start mastering these. You will be well on your way. All right, hang on with me. We're getting through these. Distraction. Surely everyone on the call, nobody gets distracted here. But it takes, like Grant, remember I said 55 hours? By the way, that was like working 55 hours. And it takes 23 minutes to regain focus after a distraction. So here are some things that I deal with. I have to block everything out. Like this is not like I couldn't be in a place where I'm getting distracted a lot to write grants. So, you're juggling the project description, project changes, letter of reference, people on holidays, And I find if you turn your attention away from it too quickly, if you're not really, really organized, it's just you're starting over again. It can be just a nightmare. So I encourage people to be flexible. If you have to work from home to get this done or get in a place where you're not interrupted. And typically, not typically, what I do is like 3 or 4 52-minute sprints a day and stop. So a 52-minute sprint is I turn my phone off, I turn my email off, I set my timer, I give all my attention. Like you start this, it's really hard initially because it's exhausting. If you do 4, or at least I'm toast. I can only do so many. I'll take like a 20-minute break after it, but that's a good way to make big gains on a grant. So I can explain it in more detail after, but I find, and then if I write all morning, then I do something else in the afternoon. Now I want to talk to you about, you know, just kind of radical honesty, because there is around grants and pain a lot of people things. And if you think of CEOs leaving, there's this, grants are winning and losing. There's a lot of feelings associated with it. And if it falls on your plate and you're doing a lot of different other things, like you've got to be able to communicate back and forth in an environment where you're like, I'm not sure I can get this done. And it's a lot. So I just wanted to say, like, we're not doing heart surgery, so no one's going to die on this, but it can be, just do your best to put this through. So let's get onto it. One is you might lose. And for a municipal audience, especially who have to mostly be accurate, can't think of too many times when you do something that doesn't work well that it's a positive, especially like maybe on a business, you can try something, fail, and get back up and move. But municipalities or bureaucrats, it's, usually want to win, but you might lose. And the reality is, it can be stressful, but I just encourage you to be confident. You're taking training like this. And also, there's a reality in grants, which is the most dangerous bridge should get fixed. And what I mean by that is, like, you're just trying to put your best project forward. That's critical. But sometimes the reality is, if there's an issue that is more dangerous and risky, there's school bus with kids going over this bridge and it's not safe. I mean, it's a dramatic example, but we all want them, we want the best person to win. That's the way I'm with grant writing. The best person should win. So do your best and go forward. Now, also, don't turn on each other. I didn't know how to say this properly, but like, it can be tension. There can be tension involved. So stay positive, be a team, start early. Remember, if it's not a perfect fit, it's usually a no in grants, right? You can avoid, I have found you can avoid most problem in grants with saying no to the grant. Usually the grant's like a perfect fit. And so this is why, hopefully this will help you. When you submit a grant, write the debrief with your email immediately after submitting. We're going to talk more about this in a minute, but you want to capture, you've submitted it. You can say, hey, here's some pros and cons we've learned. I think we're going to win about 70% chance, and you're going to need that. And the final point I want to leave you with, I'll explain this more in the one coming up, is just be honest and upfront in grants, because it all comes out. Like, it all come out at some point, whether even it's a reimbursement of a milestone. So, just be clear, be upfront, and it'll serve you in the long run. Now, let's move on to number 6. And I've got a couple of videos to break this up, so just stay with me. I know we're battling here, and I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly. But can you just read this for a second? I think it's really interesting in that our memory, because remember, grants are kind of unusual, right? Like you submit them and then you leave, and then there's like long time and then they come back. So here's some important things that you can do. One, you need a project log. And what that is a note, and you're keeping record, especially if someone leaves. Like I find with municipalities with these turnover rates, the grant's on the water, you don't know what happens. Someone comes in. So a project log is just one Word document of all your meetings and notes of what's happening so the new person can come in, but also help you with your memory moving forward. And do that debrief that I talked about. Keep a copy of the application. And it just helps with feelings. Like I just find, trust me, nice project log, it can get around. Hey, I thought you said this. I thought you said that. It can minimize all that. Now, let's talk about how to write to win. We've got an investor audience, just a couple tips with you. Remember, so you're not trying less convincing the reader and explaining. However, the fine balance is knowing what they want. I'm working with, like I said earlier, a professional project manager on our course, and she's like, Dave, should it be factual? I'm like, it needs this balance. The subheadings, as I mentioned earlier, can be really great and they can come from the grant deadlines or their industry documents. The project names can align with the grant agency's goals. But I'm going to show you a video right now. It's only a minute of the grant agency. This is Municipal Affairs, just a 1 minute clip of what they said last year to us. So I'm going to bring this up for you. And it's just a short clip. So it is Ryan Barber with Municipal Affairs. I want you to hear this. Oops, sorry. There we go. Share this, share sound. And we'll play it. It's only a minute, so just hear what he has to say. Just give me a thumbs up in the chat once it's playing so you can hear it.
Yeah, that's a good point, David. And that on authenticity piece is a big one because at the end of the day, these grant projects or these applications are also being reviewed by humans, and they have specific criteria that they're reviewing. But something that is personalized, something that is authentic, that is real for your municipality, that really demonstrates how this project is going to take something to the next level for you or how it's needed. It's really about demonstrating that need, and that authenticity just plays so well in front of those people that are reviewing your application. And so, yeah, ensuring there isn't duplication if you are working with partners, and sometimes there's multiple projects. They may not directly be in partnership, but they may lead into each other. And so sometimes you might want to cut some corners and save and use some similar information between those. But really, those panelists at the end of the day, those reviewers are looking for that authenticity, David, that you've identified, and it does help through that.
So you get the idea of I always say, when I'm writing on these applications, it's very like it's just one other person reading it. They're a human being, and it's very personal. You don't want to be throwing people under the bus. You want to say this is, very like explanation, very authentic. And I think if you can move to that place, tie it with what they want, you're really going to find these things pop. Now, when you lose, probably more important, this is a really painful situation if you lose. You've got no project log. You didn't do any debrief. And there's prospect theory, which is this theory, which is really interesting, is that the pain we feel from a loss is greater than the happiness we feel from a gain. And remember, you're dealing with other people, right? So, there's kind of this cover your butt theme on this one. So to avoid that pain, that's what you want to have these things. This can be real pain, but when you lose, just be mindful. I don't know if you notice this in my newsletter, but you don't know what's going to happen. So the housing accelerator, it opened again only for, I was speaking with them, only for applicant municipalities who lost. So grants are kind of funny like that in the sense of, oops, can you see that? Okay. Can you see the slide? Okay. Here what to do when you lose. Someone just give me a thumbs up. Pia, can you see that? Okay. Sandy, Jenny, I think that yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks. The housing accelerator opened up again. So you lose, these things can open up again. And the other thing, I want you to read this for a moment. I got this email from a student. Just read this page for a minute. I think there's a valuable lesson in it. So I think it's a really interesting thing that sometimes when you lose, just use it as an opportunity to build the trust. Like sometimes there's this, you know, people can do some weird stuff if you lose. Like, so just remember, like, be respectful, call them, have a meeting. Um, I had an agricultural client that one time lost, he brought them back, and then he got funded in December when the funding back opened. So this is a long-term relationship. Build it with them, and I think you're going to find it'll start being much better. We got two left, and then we're going to wrap things up here. What to do when you win? Have a kickoff meeting, especially with municipalities and people are like not in the same roles. Bring your project log updated. Um, when you win, get finance in the room. I strongly recommend you do that. Calendarize those milestones. So if they're like, we want the final report in a year from now, put it in your calendar. And if possible, this is really important. Report back in a way that helps the grant agency. Again, whether it's the rodeo or some sort of event where the minister's coming through, educate him or her on what they, about educate the minister on the projects. And it's just this kind of salt and pepper where you're building trust throughout the entire point. Now, Pia, I'm going to give Pia thank you for this because this is probably the biggest pain for a lot of us in grants, which is getting information from other people, which sounds kind of strange. Maybe if you're new to grants, but this will quite possibly, you can put in the chat, let me know if anyone agrees with that. I'd be curious to know. But getting information. So I have been doing this a long time. And here are my best tips for you to resolve this pain. One is I schedule working sessions. So some people are like, you need this. Like if you have a Pia, it can be helpful because she can go out and she'll get these stuff. But oftentimes I find, oh, it overwhelms people. I schedule a working session. That's me and this person on a Zoom call going through a checklist of things we need to do. And if you're the writer, I'll even write the emails for the client for them to send, right? Like that level of attention to detail. And then I say Ed. So Ed was the CEO and president of Radical, an amazing leader. And okay, with this, Ed was like very clear and assertive, but fair. And look, it's just you got to get information. So I find this is where the CAO can help because sometimes if a person isn't the boss of the other person, getting that information can be complicated. So asking people early, getting like the order of operations clear, that buy-in from those other people is really important. So CAOs out there, this is why you shouldn't say, good luck with that grant, I'm out of here, because you may be needed even on things like this that are actually much harder than you think. And then if you're on the eligible expense side, so this is for you engineering companies, et cetera, I find having one person at the municipality as the lead is really helpful, and have the CAO scheduled throughout the project to step in and help. So if you're starting, it's a 4-week project. Well, let's just stick with our 6 weeks. I had that CO even for 15 minutes for the first half of some of those check-in meetings to give an update. Something change. We need their help getting something. It's really helpful. Also keeps the CAO involved with what's going on and on top of things. So this is not easy, but it's the best I've got. And if anyone has a better idea, please let me know. Throw it in the chat or say something in question period, and it would be appreciated. Okay, with that, a couple next steps. So we'll have our next webinar. Pia will put in the chat. If you are interested, of course, we offer a course in January. And with that, we'll do some Q&A. And just thank you very much for your time. And Jeff will monitor the chat. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. So, David, the first question we have in the chat box is, what language style is best to use when writing a grant? Should it be very formal or more impersonable?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I've struggled with that too. And the more I do this, the more personal I get. Like when I speak to Ryan Barber, like, and even like in the chat at his meeting, I thought was really interesting because he's like, in the budget, there's like a comment section. And he was saying, just be real with us. Tell us what's up. Like, put in there, hey, I'm having a hard time getting a hold of the the engineering company, or we got another quote coming, or we think this is our best guess. So I have moved much less from formal to being more personable, even first tense. And but you can always ask the grant agency, which I recommend you do before you do it.
Thanks, David. There's no other questions in the Q&A box, but I will pull one from the chat box, which is how many hours of effort does it typically take to write a competitive grant submission?
Well, first of all, it's going to vary significantly, right? But that first one is, you know, if there's nothing, it very depends. But if there's nothing and it's a large grant application and they have no business plan, no financials, you're starting from scratch, you're looking at, it could take you 100 hours. Now, it can go down from that, obviously 40 hours, it's, 40, but it's longer than you think. Like I can do a grant fast in about 26 hours. By the time you factor in getting a quote, oh, they didn't come back. Oh, it's more time than you think. And like, that's the estimate. Like that's where grants becomes pure pain, right? It takes longer than you expect. But the more you can build, I know we've got some people on here with a lot of experience. I don't know if they can chime in. I would love to hear from them too. But the more pieces you get together, i.e., whether it's biographies or getting good at developing a project scope statement so that when you do ask for a quote, the quote comes back and it's good. That's a classic example, right? In that engineering example I gave you, you're like, hey, can I get a quote? And the engineering company's like, oh, can you give me more details so that I can give you a proper quote? And then just tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, away you go. It can be a lot of time.
Thanks, David. The next question is, would you say it's more a conversation than a straight line process?
Um, well, I mean, there's a deadline, right? So it's like I'm here, the deadline's coming up. So I would say it's a little bit of both, not to cop out, but you I like a straight line approach. Like I like that's why I built, this here. I'll show you. This is my advanced grant writing class. Like the reason I built it is it's a pain. Sorry, I mean it's a pain. It's really hard to do to go from one, how the government works, doing a project scope statement, finding your grants, meeting the grant agency, getting tips on making sure it's aligned, writing a strong application, making sure the quantifiable metrics are together. Like, it is more of a linear, but at the same time, you got to make it look easy and be liked.
Thanks, David. How do you measure your hours via email communication?
Well, there's a number of ways you can do it. First of all, is count the hours. I use Harvest to count mine, but I'll like, a lot of companies will say, hey, this is an update of how many hours I've got towards this project. I always like to, when I'm writing a grant for someone, like if I'm writing, it's like I expect it to take about 40 hours and I'll give them an update in 10-minute increments, especially on billing or something. Hey, I'll bill you at 10 hours. And people are pretty reasonable. What people don't like is surprises. People do not like surprises. So you want to like forecast the amount of hours and then communicate where we're at. What you don't want to be is 40 hours and someone says, I didn't know it took you that long.
David, so you provided links to the business plan, annual report, and mandate letters for municipal affairs. Do you have links to the same at the federal level?
I don't, but I would just go on to like the federal government page. It'll be right there on the page. It's a good skill to get to go in. And then another tip I want to give you is go to the parliamentary or legislature libraries. They're free resources and I use them a lot. And I email them and they have staff there to help you. So if I was on this call, I would be all over that to making sure I understand how to use the Ledge Library, both federally and provincially. The province one's my favorite place in the province.
Thanks, David. Pia did post a link in the chat. It looks like Public Works and Government Services Canada. So
Yeah, go through the libraries though. That's what I strongly recommend. And if you get good at that, oof, you're going to a whole other level. Because what you'll find is, remember those reports I was telling you about? But now you can go look at other provinces that did reports, say on innovation or something like that, and you can pull that as content. So it's pretty cool.
Thank
StatsCan,
you.
yeah, Sandy, good one. Exactly.
No other questions in the Q&A box here, David.
Thrown a lot at you.
Oh, I
Yeah,
got one more for you here.
sure.
Is it necessary to use technical vocabularies when writing a grant?
Well, I think, you know, listen, I don't know the specific grant, but in general, a lot, I mean, it'll vary, okay? Because if you're doing something for IRAP, very technical, there's going to have to be a technical component. But in general, like I'm a judge for grant agencies as well, too. Some grant agencies hire me to read them. And, you want a broad audience to understand this. I always tell people at the end of the day, the taxpayer is funding. Now, this is my opinion, okay? And it's going to vary on what you do. But like when I started my very first client at Champion Pet Foods, I took over the grants and they were all technical. I'm like, what are you doing? This needs to be easy to understand. The person reading it at agriculture maybe have a history degree. They're not an engineer. So that can depend. But in general, I lean towards clarity and I may do an appendix with something a bit more technical, to what the specifications, etc.
Thanks, David. Next question is, the Alberta Grant Gazette is an amazing resource to find grants, but do you have suggestions for any other resources or websites for where to find municipal grants?
Well, so you've got those resources. We've got the free grant database where there's like over 200 of them, both federal, provincial. You've got, and then I would go direct to the sites. But the reason why we like the municipal fair sites, but the reality is you'll go on to like Alberta Innovates and municipalities can apply for that, like a water innovation grant. Alberta Innovates has it. Municipalities can put in. And, you can become really sophisticated at this because, Inventures is usually in this, well, it's always in the spring. And where innovative entrepreneurs are, well, you can get a grant to partner with your municipality to try something out. So again, I'm talking in general terms, but a lot of work, but hopefully part of this project's making the life easier for you. I'm sure it is. I hope it is.
Thank you. No other questions right now. I know there are a couple of things in the chat that
I have a question for
Punk.
other people if we can, because we got a few minutes. Can someone put a pain in the chat for me that they think is in grants? Maybe I didn't cover it. Is there a pain? Because I know we got a lot of veterans on here. I would love to hear, some pains that maybe were missed or one maybe you agreed with or disagreed with. It's totally okay. We're trying to get better. And don't be shy. I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, maybe give people a minute. I will read from the chat here. Um, James goes, I'm a counselor, but I'm also a federal civil servant for 25 years. I find most of my fellow elected officials are generally clueless about the time and difficulty of grant writing and the reality that more applications get turned down than awarded. Would it be worthwhile for a session about grants directed to council?
Grants? What do you
I
mean by
think
that?
for the audience to be count as counselors rather than admin.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. I totally think so. Like honestly, I think like I'm just interested, like why are CAOs leaving? And that there's a report on it studying it. But I think one of it is this sort of relationship around, again, I'm speculating, I'm not an expert in this space, but I mean, if I was the executive assistant CAO, I would be dialed in on grants. I'd be educating counselors. When the counselors are saying, hey, a new grant's coming out, I'd be going back to them saying, if we do that, we can't do this. What do you want to do? Or we got to spend money to hire someone. Like that's not easy. And so, and I don't know, I don't have all the answers, but I just know what's not easy. And I find, thank you for asking that, the counselors, if you've got someone with not a lot of grant experience, they may not be communicating that really clearly. So I would love to do something like that. And I could probably put something together to show some dramatic examples, because I know sometimes you see in the news and stuff, some things gone wrong, but anything we can do to help keep people in jobs longer, getting that memory and improving. I mean, I think it sounds like a good idea.
Say James went on to add, it's hard to live up to unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. That's a good word. It's like the expectations in grant. That's almost a good one. It's like they don't sync up. People think, oh, it's like think about it. It's free money, and we got 100 people on here trying to get better at it. Like it just doesn't make sense. And there's expectation alignment. That's often. I love these comments. Oh,
See
hi,
a couple
Rochelle.
names in the chat there.
Yeah, right on. I love how Rochelle's reaching out to a grant agency. That's awesome. Oh man, we could be here all day talking about the pain. I mean, get out the coffee. Let's just get the wine session going, right? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Use the Gazette, Cochrane Immigrant Services Committee. Oh, Carla, listen to this, is determining which grant is worth taking the time to chase. Okay, Carla, really important. And let me tell you something. It looks like this because I've written grants at students. It looks like this. The grant agency loves your project. Oh my gosh, it's a great fit. Yes, you should apply. You should apply. It looks great. If you're not getting that, I've been doing this a long time. If you're not getting that, it's usually a no. Now, I'm embellishing a little bit, but not much. I have found when the kind of, it's like run if the grant agency is saying that about your project. I have found my students and clients, it's a huge, clear green light. So it's our job then, Carla, to put in front of the grant agency a really clear project that they look at it and they're like, yes or no. I find what a lot of people mess up is they put kind of a not a clear project in front of the grant agency and get not a clear answer. That's called, grant fog. Not good. This is fun. All right. I appreciate everybody.
And I'm seeing no other questions here, David.
Okay.
No other pains coming in, and we're
Okay. For
just
those
about
of
at
you,
time here. So
maybe see you in December. We will update all the municipal grants and we'll bring that list for you. So you'll have that. Hi, John. Great to see you. And help you get into 2025 and really improving grants, become great at it. Thank you, Jeff.
thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully we'll see everyone in December.
Okay. Take care, everybody. See ya. Thank you, Pia. Oh, you've got a survey coming too, please. When you see this survey, if you could fill it out for us, we would love that. Okay. Bye-bye.